Hello and welcome to the Fighting Spirit Podcast. As always, I'm Jason and I'm here to bring you your fight picks for the event taking place in Vancouver, British Columbia, where Justin Gaethje will be taking on Donald Cowboy Cerrone in what could be a title contender bout at 155 pounds. This might be potentially a fight to maybe get Conor, to maybe go after Khabib. Things are a little bit up in the air, but we know the winner will go on to bigger and better things. Let's talk about the event. Got a lot of veterans in this one, no debuting fighters. Let's get into it. Here's the show. Alright, so I'm going to try to wrap this one up pretty quick. I think the podcast maybe have been getting a little long in the tooth. Please write to me if you're not liking them past that 20-minute mark. If you're happy with a shorter podcast, let me know. If you like a longer one, that's good too. I'm going to try to keep it a little more concise than some of the other ones here, because to be honest, I only have really a lot to say about the main event, and let's talk about it. The highlight, Justin Gaethje taking on Donald Cowboy Cerrone. So last time Cerrone was in a fight, it was the people's fight. It was him versus Tony Ferguson. This is another phenomenal contest. I love both of these fighters. However, in this particular contest, I like the former World Series of Fighting champion, Justin the Highlight Gaethje. This dude gets it done, and he has wrestling in his back pocket that he never seems to use. I think that he has the ability to shut down Cerrone. Are we going to see his wrestling on display? No, I don't honestly think so. I think he wants to strike with Cerrone, who's a very good Muay Thai kickboxer himself, and he has very good skills on the ground, but I don't think those are really going to be on showcase here unless Cowboy tries to dictate that, and even then that could be a little bit dangerous. Let's talk about why I think Justin really gets it done, though. He is a heavy pressure fighter. He goes in and he is always there in front of you, punishing you with soccer-like leg kicks and standing in front of your face. Donald Cerrone does not deal very well with pressure. Look at his fight with RDA. Look at his fight with Tony Ferguson. Now, if Cowboy can somehow keep Justin away, I think that he could potentially find rhythm and range and knock out Gaethje. We know that Gaethje does take a lot of damage, but Cowboy just doesn't respond well to pressure, especially early pressure. He's the kind of guy who doesn't really turn it on until later in the first round, maybe the second round. But those first 3 minutes of the fight, he needs something to get him going, and I don't think he's going to find it in this one. I think Gaethje's going to put it on too heavy, too early, and he's going to shut down Cowboy. Now, we also got to look at the training camps here. We got Gaethje as a Genesis training camp fighter, and he also is trained personally by Trevor Whitman, one of the best trainers in the world. Donald Cerrone had a fallout with Jackson Wink, and now he's back over at BMF Ranch, where, the talent pool is a little more shallow. Granted, he still has all of that past training over at Jackson Wink, but I don't think it's going to carry forward here at BMF. Both of these guys are also on very good win streaks at the moment. You do have that TKO doctor stoppage with Cerrone and Ferguson, but hey, it is Ferguson after all, right? Looking over at Gaethje, yes, he had a rough start to his UFC debut, right? He came in, good win over Michael Johnson, but then takes a loss, KO to Eddie Alvarez and a TKO to Desapore, but I think he got better since then because we saw him KO James Vick and Edson Barboza in the first round. I think this is a guy who's leveled up. I think he's a guy that can make Cerrone look bad. He can make, I think, Cerrone look worse than even Tony made him look. I think that this is the kind of guy that can go in and potentially give trouble to a guy like Khabib. Now, that's looking ahead. I understand that Gaethje has to win this fight. But if it is a pure striking contest, and even if Cerrone tried to push it to the ground, I think none of us really know how good Gaethje's grappling is. We know he was an NCAA wrestler. We know that his talent pool is there. We just don't know how deep it goes. And I think maybe Cerrone could try to exploit that, see how good it actually is. He does have those 17 submissions. Cerrone, for such a striking heavy fighter, I think a lot of people think of him that way. He has 17 submissions, right? This guy gets it done on the ground. Gaethje just the one. Okay, Gaethje has 17 KOs over his 20 wins. The guy shuts the door. Now, getting back to last week where we talked about Dustin not shutting the door on Khabib, I don't think you got to worry about that with Justin Gaethje. Granted, psychologically, everybody can be broken, and I think that was the case last week, but I feel like Gaethje is so pressure heavy that he is going to stay in the face of Cerrone. He's going to be able to shut him down, and I see a early stoppage. This one first, maybe even second round. I see him getting it done. We are picking the highlight Justin Gaethje, and I'm calling it out. If he doesn't fight Conor, he's fighting Khabib after Tony, and I'm looking forward to that contest. Gaethje versus anyone. I'm just a Gaethje fan. I love the dude. He's just an awesome human being. He called Conor out over this weekend, calling him a trash human being. So we've planted the seed for that one. We're planting the seed with his performance against Cerrone. He's either going to get the money crown or the 155 crown shot coming soon. All right, in our next contest, this one going to take place at light heavyweight. We have Glover Teixeira, who's 39 years of age now, taking on a young man in Nikita Krylov, the minor. And this one, even though I think Glover Teixeira has proven himself a formidable opponent with 2 submissions over his last 2 fights, I think he's going to have a problem with the dynamicism or the ability to shut the door multiple ways that Krylov has. The guy just has a lot of tools in his toolkit. 10 KOs, 15 submissions, 25 wins. What's that? 0 decision wins. The guy has fight IQ. Krylov shuts the door. Has he been submitted? Yes. And has he been KO'd? Absolutely. Does Glover have those skills, especially the submissions? He does for sure. He has 8 over his 29 wins, and he's exploiting that, rear naked choke and the arm triangle choke in his last 2 bouts. I don't think, though, he's going to be able to deal with the athleticism of Krylov. I think Krylov is going to be able to make Glover look like the tired, weathered fighter that he is at this point. I mean, look what Krylov did to such a dynamic striker like Ovince St. Preux. Right? He was able to use his striking to set up a ground game that led to a rear naked choke. I don't think, basically we've seen Glover kind of bounce back in the last couple of bouts. I don't think that he's like his Carl Robinson fight, right? I thought Carl had him basically dead to rights. He managed to get things to the ground and lock it up. So I think his veteranness, his experience, his saltiness, his grittiness paid off there, but I don't think it's going to be able to work here. I think Nikita Krylov gets it done. I see him picking up the W in Vancouver. All right, in our next matchup, we have an AKA fighter in Todd Duffy taking on a strong style. So this is actually going to be Stipe Miocic's fight camp in Jeff Lights Out Hughes. And this one should be a very good fight for a heavyweight matchup. We have 2 very good gyms, especially when you look over at Hughes, has the heavyweight champion, training partner in there, same coaches. And then look over at Todd Duffy. I mean, he's training with the best. You have Cormier there. You obviously have Khabib training over there with Javier Mendez. And it's just 2 really good fight camps. However, though, I think that Todd Duffy is going to be able to actually get this one done. He hasn't fought in quite a while. His last loss was actually to Frank Mir back in 2015, but I think a fighter that comes back after that time off wants to come back and get it done. I think they're hungry, and I think that Duffy can prove himself the better man in this contest. Both guys are coming off of losses, though. We obviously had the KO of Frank Mir way back when, and then we look over at Jeff Hughes here, and he has really just the 2 contests. He got a KO in the Dana White Contender Series, and he got a split decision loss in his real deal UFC debut. I think a guy like Todd Duffy, he's a little bit older at 33 years of age, but only slightly older than Jeff Hughes. I think Hughes has the experience for his age. He fought in the UFC for 3 different contests, got to the point where he was able to fight Frank Mir back in the day. I think this is a kind of guy that can come back and make a statement and put his name back on the map at heavyweight. It is a very much a wild card for who could step up at this point. We have a couple of great fighters brewing, but for the most part, there isn't a whole lot of talent there. So I think Duffy can put a stamp on this one and pick up a W in this match. In our next matchup, this time at welterweight, we're going to have 2 guys that are near debuting fighters. Both of them have a fight each under their belt in the UFC, and I think it could be an interesting contest. We have Michael Pereira taking on Sergey Honda. Sergey Honda. I'm going with that one. So we have both fighters have a lot of experience outside of the UFC. We have Michael, 22-9, 9 KOs, 6 submissions. And then we have Sergey, or Honda, coming with 10 KOs and 7 submissions over 26 wins. So we're talking about very similar skill sets, very similar decisions, and very similar experience outside of the UFC. Both of them haven't had a loss in over a year. Both of them have wins in their UFC debuts. Granted, Pereira's was better against Danny Roberts, where he picked up the KO flying knee. But flying knees, those things are rare. Those things, they're kind of luck. Not everybody can run into a match and take somebody out with one of those, I guess, unless your name is Johnny Walker. He has probably the best record for that kind of stuff. So I don't think we're going to have that kind of contest. I think we're going to have something that stays on the feet, but also could be a tight grappling matchup where I think, honestly, Sergey Honda here is going to have the slight edge in. I think he's going to be able to at least pick up a decision here. Granted, anything can happen. Both these guys have very good hands, very good submissions, but I think they are evenly matched enough where I don't think things are going to get too wild, and I think this thing's going to decision. We're ultimately picking up Sergey Honda in this matchup. All right, in our next one, we have probably one of my favorite fights. It's kind of maybe, I don't know if a dark horse is the right way to put it, but I think this is a good fight. Uriah Primetime Hall. Maybe not quite primetime. Maybe never lived up to expectation, Hall. That's kind of rough. I'm sorry. It's true, though. It's absolutely true. This guy never quite lived up, I think, to his hype. Taking on Antonio Carlos Jr. Shoeface. I do love his fight name. It's a little ridiculous. He doesn't quite look like a shoe, for what it's worth. But Cara de Zapato is taking on Uriah Hall in this one. And even though I said some, crap about Uriah Hall, I think he picks up the W here. And when I predict that you can pick up the W, I can talk a little bit of crap because I think ultimately you're going to prove my own opinion of you wrong in this one. We have an Extreme Couture fighter taking on a top teamer in Antonio Carlos Jr. Now, granted, I do like the team of ATT a bit better than Extreme Couture, but both solid gyms, both have a lot of champions there, and I think that they are closer than your average, bear, closer than your average gym. So ultimately, I think Hall picks this one up. I think him getting that win over Bevan Lewis via KO was just a great one. He kind of pulled that one out of his hat, though. I thought he was ultimately losing that fight. He lost previously TKO to that one, but I think he feels a little bit re-energized after that one. And Carlos Jr., who lost to Ian Heinz, I didn't think he was looking all that good. I think that Hall's going to be able to neutralize some of that takedown game. I think that his takedown defense is halfway decent, and I think his hands are just phenomenal. So we got a fighter in Carlos Jr., who's 0 KOs, 8 submissions, going up against a guy who's 11 KOs and 1 submission. And if Hall can put his hands on you, you will go down. I don't think Carlos Jr. actually has the takedown ability. Like a lot of your typical BJJ guys, he's not an amazing takedown artist. Granted, he's great when he gets there, but he is no Khabib Nurmagomedov when it comes to takedowns, and he's not going to be able to put it on the mat where it's, I think, going to be his time to shine. I think Uriah Hall keeps it standing and picks up maybe a TKO, maybe a decision just based on his striking output. Hall does have decent enough cardio. I think he can push it, whereas I think Carlos Jr. isn't as good, especially if you keep the pace high. So ultimately in this one, we are picking Uriah Hall in Vancouver. All right, our next one's going to be an amazing contest at light heavy because we got a fighter from down under in Jimmy Crute. I do love him, the Brute, taking on Misha Cirkunov, a Latvian fighter. And I think this one could be very good. So both these guys have good hands. They have good submissions. I think submissions for Cirkunov are a little bit better, but Crute is undefeated. This guy is taking on all comers. Knocked out Sam Alvey, and Sam Alvey's a tough dude. Knocked him out first round. He submits Paul the Bear Jew Craig. Just think about that for a second. He submits the Bear Jew. The Bear Jew has 10 submissions to his record over his 11 wins. All he does is submit guys, and he got submitted by a guy who had been knocking people out previous to that. First round KO in the Dana White Contender Series, and first round KO to Sam Alvey. Jimmy the Brute Crute just looks phenomenal right now. Misha Cirkunov, he looks okay. He did have a good win over Patrick Cummings, but he had losses to Volkan Ozdemir, Glover Teixeira, and Johnny Walker. I think this is a setup to boost Crute against a tough Eastern European fighter that I think is probably just going to get steamrolled here. I got to be honest. I think Crute finishes this thing early. I think he puts him down. His fight IQ looks great. He does have 3 decisions, but I think he's getting it done a lot now. I mean, the guy hasn't had a decision since early 2018, so it's been a year since he picked up his last decision, and I think he keeps the motor going. I think he picks up a KO here or TKO early on. We're picking the brute Jimmy Crute in Vancouver. All right, this next one at heavyweight is tough for me to call. This is definitely my grain of salt fight of the night here. So I have Marcin Tybura taking on Augusto Sakai. So Augusto Sakai has a terrible body shape, but does manage to get wins. He has 10 KOs over his 13 wins, and he hasn't had a loss since 2017, but the guy just not built very well. Then you look over at Tybura, he looks a little bit more like a traditional heavyweight, maybe not in the best shape, maybe not quite, Nelson, what's his name? Nelson, that's the guy with the big beer belly. Not quite to that style, but Augusto Sakai just looks flabby. There's no definition. It looks like he once was a really fat guy. They got into shape, and he's just flopping all over the place with his big man boobies just hanging out there. And his stomach, too. He's got a little fupa action. You can see it. Just kind of hangs over the top of the waist. And I'm having maybe too much fun with this right now. But I think ultimately Marcin Tybura doesn't quite live up to his talent. He's training at a great gym in Jackson Wink, but I think Sakai is the better fighter here. This one is very close to call, though. I think this one could go either way. But Sakai, for all of his, physical disadvantages, in my opinion, things you make fun of, I think he's going to get the W here. I think he's going to be able to hurt Tybura like a lot of other fighters have been able to. We've seen him knocked out by Derek Lewis and Shamil Aberdukimov. He hasn't had an actual shut-the-door finish since 2017, and that was against Luis Enrique Barboza. So ultimately, we are picking Augusto Sakai, man boobies, in this one. All right, in this next one, we have the Coltrane Smith, taking on Miles Chapo Johns. And so I don't have much to say about this one. We know that Chapo Johns is basically kind of an in-betweener. He's not making his debut because he had a Dana White Contender Series fight. However, he hasn't fought in the UFC yet. So his data is limited, and so is Coltrane Smith. He'll be having the one fight against Mitch Gagnon in the UFC, but he did win that one in his debut, taking on Chapo here. And so this one is going to be an interesting fight. It's going to be very close. I'm not really sure how much I can really talk about this one. We know that the fight IQ seems to be higher out of the Coltrane, but I think Miles John just has much better striking output, even though he does get hit quite a bit. And I think that he's going to be able to pick up a win here. So we are picking Miles Chapo John in this contest. In our next contest, we have Marvin, the Italian Dream Vittori, taking on, he's back, ladies and gentlemen, Andrew L. Dirty Sanchez. The Dirty Sanchez is back with a vengeance, and he's here to pick up a W. I am calling it. He's picking up a W. So we got a Kings MMA fighter in Vittori taking on a TriStar fighter in the Dirty Sanchez. And I think that Sanchez just has a little bit better striking here. I think that they're grappling. I think Vittori is a little bit better grappler, but I think ultimately Sanchez isn't totally at a loss if it found the mat, and I think his edge in the striking closes it out here. I also love Faraz Zahabi. Nothing against Kings, but I like Faraz a little bit more as a trainer, and I think that speaks to the way he gets it done here. So we are picking L. Dirty Sanchez in this matchup. All right, as we're starting to run a little bit long here, I said I'd try to keep it a little bit short. So I'm going to run down the last 4 fights here, and I'll just go with who I believe is going to win. Except, actually, I'll talk a little bit about this one. Brad Katona is going to be taking on Hunter Azure, and this is an interesting fight. So Hunter, we don't really have too much information about, but he's 7-0. He looked really good in the Dana White Contender Series, taking on a fighter that just came off of a loss. His first loss in the UFC in Brad Katona. His SPG Ireland fighter. I do like John Kavanagh, but I do like MMA Lab basically just as much. And I think ultimately here, the striking from what we've seen or what the stats say out of Azure, I think he's actually going to pick up a W over Katona here. I don't like Katona in this matchup, which does kind of hurt me to say because I actually like Katona. I actually didn't even want to see him lose in his last matchup, but I feel like Hunter's going to get the win here based on the information that I have. Is it going to be a blowout? No. And am I guaranteed to be right about this one? I don't think so. I still like Hunter ultimately. I could go with what the stats say, but this one is another grain of salt, another grain of salt kind of fight, and I maybe wouldn't go too heavy into this one. Ultimately, though, we are picking up Hunter Azure. And the next matchup, this one's very close. Chaz Skelly taking on Jordan Griffin. So this one, I do have Griffin taking this one. I think that he is the slightly edged out better fighter here at featherweight. Then we have Luis Smolka taking Ryan McDonald. And this one, I'm not the biggest fan of Smolka because his striking is, I don't know. I don't really care for Smolka sometimes. I think that he just doesn't perform as well, but I am picking him in this one. I think he's going to get a W over Ryan McDonald, but he does scare me a lot. The guy is not a perfect fighter by any means. McDonald, the Golden Arches here, has a much better chance or higher fight IQ, I think, than Smolka. We'll see how it plays out, though. Smolka is a veteran, and I think he could put it on McDonald if given the opportunity. And then in our last matchup, we're going to have Kyle Perpolic taking on Austin Hubbard, and I think Austin Hubbard gets it done here. So, hey, I just crossed the 20-minute mark. Tried to pick up the pace for anybody who maybe didn't want to hear a little bit extra on there. Plus, with a lot of those fights, I don't have as much to say about, so I think it's okay just to kind of give the picks for those. So, let's go over them one more time. All right, so we have Gaethje, Krylov, Duffy, Honda, Hall, Crute, Sakai, Johns, Sanchez, Azure, Griffin, Smolka, and then to finally round things out, Austin Hubbard. Those are your picks for UFC Fight Night, Gaethje versus Cowboy in Vancouver, British Columbia. All right, so let's get into housekeeping here. You can get in touch with the Fighting Spirit Podcast at fightingspiritpodcast@gmail.com. You also can get us on your favorite podcast platform of choice, Spotify, as well as YouTube. Please like and subscribe there. And then there's a Patreon in the description down below. Please go there if you'd like to support the Fighting Spirit Podcast at the dollar amount that makes the most sense to you. I still plan on having that liquor review come out this Thursday. I still need to record it, so maybe Wednesday evening I'll have to knock that one out. But I will try to get it out to you on Thursday as promised. All right, so besides that, we'll obviously be back with the retrospective and then, on and on to the next contest. So let's close things out here before I ramble too much. And until I speak with you again, happy fight picking.